All right, let's dive into something really fascinating today. We're talking about ancient flying machines, Vimanas.
Vimanas.
And get this, our sources are 3 different hypnosis sessions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Each one giving us like a peek into, a past that's like shrouded in mystery.
Really interesting. And I think, you know, it's those glimpses, those little common threads that run through these different accounts. That's what we should really focus on.
Absolutely.
We're not saying these sessions are like, definitive proof or anything.
Right.
But they're like pieces of a puzzle, little clues that might reveal a whole lost chapter of human history.
I like that. Pieces of a puzzle. So everyone listening, put on your explorer hats because we're going on an adventure where like ancient texts and hypnotic memories kind of like collide.
Yeah.
What we end up with is a picture of these Vimanas as like disc-shaped craft,
Yeah.
often metallic with domes. I mean, you almost think like flying saucers.
I was going to say, it sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, but the visual it's so similar.
Yeah. And across these sessions, one thing that keeps coming up is this sense that Vimanas were more than just machines.
Okay.
It's like they worked on principles that blur the line between, technology and consciousness.
All right, so there's this one session that talks about blue gas propulsion.
Right.
Could that be something like what we're starting to understand now as plasma propulsion?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Definitely makes you think. I mean, the session describes the spinning mechanism, right? That ignites the blue gas and creates this huge amount of power. But it also mentions that the floor of the Vimana stays cool.
Interesting.
If that's true, we're talking about an energy efficiency that's way beyond anything we can do today.
Way beyond, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the pilot's role in all this? One session mentions a telepathic connection with the Vimana through a special crystal.
Yeah, it's like the pilot's thoughts were directly controlling the machine. And if we think about what psychic abilities could have meant back then, we're talking about the ability to manipulate energy and matter with your mind.
It's almost like an extension of the pilot's will.
Exactly.
So it's not just nuts and bolts here. It's a totally different way of thinking about interacting with the world.
Absolutely.
A fusion of mind and machine.
Yeah.
And speaking of mind-blowing, 2 sessions link Vimanas to this legendary Rama Empire.
Oh, right.
Now, for anyone who isn't familiar, the Rama Empire is a big part of the Ramayana.
One of India's most famous epic poems.
Exactly. And in the Ramayana, they portray this empire as like a golden age.
Yeah.
But these hypnosis sessions, they offer kind of a twist on that.
Interesting.
They suggest that the Rama Empire's real advancement wasn't, like physical technology.
Yeah.
It was their mastery of psychic abilities.
Wow. So instead of focusing on things like metallurgy or engineering, they might have developed technology that directly interface with consciousness.
Yeah, that's a radical concept.
It is. And it's these areas of overlap where multiple sessions kind of converge on a similar theme. That's where we find the most compelling evidence for a potentially lost history of advanced technology and consciousness.
Before we get too carried away with the possibilities, though, we got to acknowledge that these sessions don't always agree, like on the specifics.
Right.
Take Vimana propulsion, for example.
Yeah. Some describe that blue gas we talked about. Others talk about manipulating gravity. And one session even says there's no fuel source at all.
No fuel source. So how do we make sense of these discrepancies? I mean, are we dealing with like fragmented memories? Or could there have been different types of Vimanas, each with its own propulsion system?
It's a great question. It's like trying to put together a puzzle where some pieces are missing.
Yeah.
And others just don't seem to fit. I think we need to be aware of both the potential for lost knowledge and the limitations of, trying to remember things through hypnosis.
Okay, so let's recap. We have these really intriguing descriptions of Vimanas, these little hints of advanced technology, and a connection to this civilization that maybe mastered consciousness in ways we can't even fathom.
Right.
But we also have contradictions, these fantastical elements we can't ignore.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to look for those common threads.
Yeah.
Those recurring details that emerge from each person's story. Because it's in those shared elements that we might find the most compelling clues to a past that's both familiar and totally alien.
All right, so we've kind of laid the groundwork. We've got a sense of what these Vimanas might have been like, at least according to these hypnosis sessions.
Yeah.
But now let's dive into the individual accounts, the personal stories of those who claim to have witnessed these incredible machines firsthand.
Each session offers a unique perspective,
Yeah.
a different window into this lost world. And while we should definitely approach them with a healthy dose of skepticism,
Of course.
we also need to stay open to the possibility that they hold fragments of a truth we're only beginning to rediscover. Before we jump into those individual accounts, there's this thing that keeps popping up when people talk about ancient technologies.
What's that?
The Nazi connection.
Oh, right, right.
All three of our sessions actually mentioned it.
Yeah, it's like this whole idea that the Nazis were obsessed with ancient texts, right?
Yes.
Like they believed these texts held secrets to super powerful technologies, maybe even like supernatural powers.
Yeah.
Like, did they actually think they'd find blueprints for Vimanas hidden in some old Sanskrit scroll?
Well, the sessions all agree on one thing. The Nazis were definitely super interested in ancient Indian and Tibetan texts. They thought these texts held clues to, like, a lost history of these super advanced civilizations.
Yeah.
And they wanted any advantage they could get, to try and take over the world.
It really makes you wonder, like, what if those ancient texts actually did have knowledge about Vimanas? Could the Nazis decode it? Did they try to build their own Vimanas based on what they found?
Well, that's where the accounts start to differ. Some suggest that the Nazis actually figured it out.
Really?
They even tried to use the technology, but others say they never really understood it
Wow.
or were able to actually build anything based on it.
So it's like a mystery within a mystery?
It is.
Kind of like an Indiana Jones movie,
Yeah.
except maybe a little less, swashbuckling and a lot more, well, sinister.
Yeah, for sure. But the Nazi connection is a good reminder that the search for knowledge, especially powerful technology, it can be driven by a lot of different things. Some
Yeah.
good, some not so good.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Let's finally hear some of those individual stories. Each hypnosis session gives us a different perspective, a personal journey into the past. Where do we start?
Let's start with a session that gives a really vivid account of an actual Vimana encounter. This person describes seeing a Vimana landing in what's now India, hundreds of years ago, and they remember these intricate carvings all over the Vimana, like a language they couldn't understand.
Wait, does this connect to those mantra-activated designs we talked about earlier? Like, was there some kind of energy thing going on?
That's what's so interesting. The session talks about the carvings glowing with this strange light as the Vimana landed.
Wow.
Like it was powered by something we just don't get. Like the Vimana was responding to a certain vibration or frequency.
So not just pushing buttons or flipping switches.
No.
Maybe activating it with sound or even thought.
Exactly. It's a whole different way of thinking about how technology works.
Yeah. What else does this session say about the encounter?
The person describes these beings coming out of the Vimana. Not human, at least not as we understand it. They describe them as tall and slender with this aura of power.
Okay.
And they seem to communicate without talking, like telepathy or something.
Okay, now that's where things start to get a little out there, right? I mean, we talked about advanced psychic abilities, but now we're talking about non-human beings. That's a pretty big leap.
It is. And while we need to be careful about taking these claims as fact, it's important to remember that what we know about the past is always changing. What might seem crazy today could be totally normal tomorrow, as we learn more about the real history of our planet and everyone who's been here.
True. So we have this amazing picture of a Vimana landing, glowing carvings, and these beings who communicate telepathically. What about the next session? What does that add to our picture?
The next session focuses on the experience of someone who claims they were a Vimana pilot in a past life. They describe this really deep connection with the machine, almost like it was part of their body.
Like that telepathic link we talked about. The idea that the pilot could control the Vimana with their mind.
Exactly. This person describes flying the Vimana not with physical controls, but with their thoughts and focus. They talk about traveling not just through space, but through different realms of existence.
Different realms.
Like, it suggests a level of consciousness and technology that's way beyond anything we can understand right now.
That's mind-blowing. It's like they were traveling through different dimensions or something. Is there anything in the other sessions that backs up this idea of interdimensional travel?
Actually, yeah. The third session has some interesting parallels. It describes Vimanas as being able to control gravity and even bend space and time, so they could travel huge distances instantly.
Wait, are we talking faster than light travel here? Like wormholes? This is sounding like science fiction.
It does, doesn't it? And while we can't say for sure if these claims are true, the fact that multiple sessions talk about Vimanas breaking the laws of physics, well, it makes you think.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so one session gives us a visual of a Vimana landing. Another talks about this incredible mind-machine connection from the pilot's perspective. And a third suggests they could travel between dimensions. It's a lot to process.
It is, but what's really fascinating is how these stories, even with all the fantastical stuff, they all point to this one idea. Vimanas weren't just machines, they were vehicles of consciousness, able to interact with reality in ways we're just starting to understand.
This is all super interesting. But are there any parts of these sessions that make you question if they're real?
Well, one session talks about encounters with reptilian beings, which is a common theme in UFO stories.
Right.
It's interesting, but we have to remember that hypnosis can be influenced by symbolism or subconscious thoughts.
Yeah, it's like trying to figure out what's real and what's not.
Exactly.
What's literal and what's metaphorical. We need to listen carefully, weigh the evidence, and come to our own conclusions.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about these deep dives. They make us think critically, see things from different perspectives, and consider the possibility that history is way more complex and amazing than we think it is.
Okay, so we've been on this journey exploring these, Vimana accounts.
Yeah.
And even with, some parts not matching up or sounding a bit out there,
Right.
it really does feel like we're seeing this, like this picture of something amazing, something beyond what we normally think about.
I agree. It's like we're getting these glimpses into a civilization that knew so much about, both technology and consciousness.
Yeah.
And they were connected in ways we can barely even imagine today.
We heard about those blue gas engines, the designs that react to sound or thoughts, and pilots who could fly just by, thinking about it.
It's pretty incredible.
And then there's this whole idea that Vimanas could, mess with gravity and even, bend space and time.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. But even if we, set aside the really out there stuff, what's left is still pretty amazing. This idea that maybe humans were way more advanced in the past than we think.
Yeah.
So what does it all mean? What are the big takeaways from these hypnotic trips into history?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that these accounts show us what might be possible. They make us rethink everything we thought we knew about, technology, about what our minds can do, and how creative humans can be.
It's like we're expanding the limits of what we thought was possible, both for those ancient civilizations and for us today.
Absolutely. These sessions, whether they're literal or metaphorical, remind us that our understanding of history is always evolving. New discoveries happen all the time. And what seems impossible now could be totally normal in the future.
Yeah, I like that. So even if we can't definitively say, yes, Vimanas existed exactly like this,
Right.
these accounts still give us this awesome chance to explore, those edges of what we know, to question the limits of what we think is real.
Exactly. And it encourages us to be both skeptical and open-minded,
Yeah.
to be curious about the unknown and ready to consider new perspectives, even if they challenge everything we thought we knew.
This has been a great deep dive, full of wonder, speculation, and a whole lot of what-ifs.
It has. And remember, even though we can't fully verify these accounts, they're a great starting point. If you're curious, dig into the source material yourselves, do your own research, and come to your own conclusions.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay open to all the amazing possibilities that are hidden in the mysteries of the past.
I agree. Until next time, happy deep diving.